to the Absolute Guard podcast. You're listening to an Absolute Extra, a new show format where we do smaller, contained episodes in one-on-one fashion with a special guest. Today's special guest is going to be KingHippo, aka Tanner. We're going to be talking about Street Fighter 6.
Oh
What's up,
man,
Tanner?
the guest's so nice they had me on thrice. Although at this point you got to sick of me a little bit, but I'll do my best to make it entertaining, John. Appreciate being
Cheers.
back on again.
Cheers. Originally we were just going to talk shop about Street Fighter 6, but then in the past couple days, the character trailer for Zangief, Lily, and Cammy dropped, and so we thought we would talk through each of those three characters and get general impressions and reactions, basically, of the show, of the different characters in the trailers themselves.
Especially now, this is our launch roster. I believe these were the final three characters that make up the launch roster as we will get them. So
yeah,
nice to know that we're kind of all set. I think it's 18.
Yep, 18 total characters. There's 3 DLC, or is it 4 DLC characters that have been leaked as well, but this is the launch roster. Yeah, I wonder if they'll even announce the DLC characters before launch. Is that still considered a faux pas?
No, not anymore. I mean, pre-launch DLC. I mean, NRS does it all the time. Like if you watched an NRS trailer for like MK11, Shao Kahn was at the end of every trailer. It was like Shao Kahn Day 1 DLC. If you know, my guess is maybe one character will be that, but we'll see who it might be. But yeah, I think 18 is a solid starting point. I think that's about how many like Street Fighter 4 had, maybe a little bit more. The console version, not the arcade one. The arcade one had shorter, but yeah, I think that's a decent starting. But because obviously this roster is going to grow. I imagine it'll be like Street Fighter 5, where eventually we're going to have like 70 characters, and it'll just be just this huge sprawling mess. But for now, very nice.
Yeah, I in general, the idea of like how the characters, because whenever you add characters to the game, it changes it slightly. Like it's like kind of like a nice dish that you're preparing while cooking, right? And in general, I've noticed throughout the life cycle of previous games, in previous generations rather, like the developers kind of figured out the meta as they were as the seasons went on in the game, and over time their balance changes, or the new characters they added ended up having tools that they thought they wanted to balance around. An example in Street Fighter 5 is that, at the start of it, a lot of the launch characters had throw loops, but over time they ended up nerfing those throw loops, and then any new characters that they added to the game, they knew not to add a throw loop to those characters.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, pardon me.
Bless you.
Like Invincible Uppercuts was another one of season 1, sort of jab anti-airs. I think also, like, no one really had a jab that like hit up,
right?
After that first season. So yeah, they definitely learn from time to time, and I think most people seem to agree. Street Fighter 5 sort of started to peak around like season 3. So when you got like Akuma, Sakura, Cody, Zeku, well, I think Zeku was maybe late season 2, but they were starting to get more interesting characters as it went on, and then of course we would get characters like Oro, who are super cool. Very, very late, but it was well put. I think you do learn a lot about the game as you go on, and then you can and then things will change too, like mechanics. So you get like V Shift came in late. V Skill 1 and 2, V Skill 2 and V Trigger 2 obviously were huge game changers. And I think it's just a little bit of fun, if these games are going to be live service games, anytime a new character drops, everyone's talking about it. Everyone's trying to play it. You go online, everyone's playing it. It's just a good, fun time. So I hope that, even on release, kind of the one thing I liked about this Street Fighter 6, and this is, I guess, maybe a little knock on wood here, that they're not going to do another beta, because I think when Street Fighter 5 did a beta, we had, I think, every character but Fong had been in the beta at that point. So there really wasn't much surprise to be left by the time the actual game came out. But now we're going to have, 10 or so characters to dig into, which I think is really cool.
Yeah, and dig into them we will, because they all seem to represent a variety of different styles. Just moving in to talk about Geef first,
let's get into that.
We've been talking a lot about, all the different characters in the current beta, the current build of the beta, which was December of 2022, and there's no grappler representation. And so all of our balanced guesses have been kind of based around, I don't know how command grabs are going to be done. And this is the first instance of a character that is dedicated. I guess Manon is a grappler too, but Zangief is like the quintessential grappler.
The grappler, yes.
Yeah. So we can kind of base a lot of like general balance decision ideas around his move set and like general like theories about it around his move set, because they are the kind of thing we all think of when we think of a command grab. An SPD is what we think of with a command grab.
100%, yeah, 360. I'm sure Manon has those. We
Sure.
just, it's Zangief, the big. They got to be like a big hefty dude. That's usually what we think of when we think of grapplers. So yeah, it's good to see Zangief finally here to
Sure.
kind of show off what he can do.
One of the first things I noticed in the trailer footage here is that he has a kind of a stomping move,
Yeah,
and a chop move, and like they look like target combos. And I've never,
that's exactly
yeah,
what I would have said. Target combos. And what do you think about that?
I have never seen Geef with a target combo before. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that doesn't seem like a standard thing,
Not that I can remember. He's
right?
usually pretty bare bones as far as like his normal attacks. Like he doesn't even have like command normals and stuff like that. That
Yeah,
goes back. I mean, in ST he had that hot move, and I think that's about it. Maybe sometimes his sweep has had an extra like a little oomph if you do down forward, but other than that, yeah, he's been pretty vanilla as far as that stuff goes, and all of his sauce is kind of in his grabs. But here, we see him doing what looks like a standing medium, maybe a standing heavy attack target combo and a low hitting stomp move
yeah.
that stomps on Honda's toes here.
Like one thing I found interesting about, like, at the beginning of a game's life cycle, there's always a subset of players that play Zangief, and like that subset of players, of beginner players specifically, beginner players, like some of them will gravitate towards a Shoto. Others will gravitate towards whatever they think is cool. Some will like pick the girl flavor of the month or whatever. But then specifically for Zangief, there's just a set of players that they usually don't put a lot of pride in their execution, and they usually just say, I want to do the lariat with 3 punches, and I want to spin the circle of the arcade stick.
Mm-hmm.
um and
Churning
so
butter, that's where we got that
yeah,
term. It's like
yep,
just
churning the
a kind of
butter, yeah.
it's kind of used as a derogatory, like, oh, that's what you say when someone's just mashing a pile driver as fast as possible.
But that's the thing though, is they want to mash, right? And so like the idea of giving him a target combo allows the Geef to mash with their right hand instead of their left hand.
That's true, yeah. And I think that makes sense for the character too. Like he's just slamming on buttons as hard as he can, right? He's doing his big chops, he's doing his stomps. I think that fits, and I think if we can move it into like maybe a gameplay, maybe perspective on how that is.
Yeah.
The thing about Zangief, if you're going back to Street Fighter 4, where he was initially an incredibly strong character, and then he got dialed back pretty significantly as the game went on, but he was always pretty solid. One of the things that really helped him was that was the first game in a long time where he really had like hit confirms he could do from his really long range jabs.
Yeah.
He had the long stand short, and then he would go into the green hand. And in the original, that was a knockdown. It was a crazy good knockdown. And then they turned it into like a standing, advantage one. And that wasn't as good. But it was still like the idea was like he would walk forward and hit standing medium punch a lot, which was a solid poke.
Right.
It didn't lead to much, but it was solid. And then he would, if he got in close, he'd start doing the jab chains into the EX green hand, and then you had to guess a lot. So now it's like in Street Fighter 5, he didn't have that. He still had decent jabs. I mean, he could confirm if he was close enough, but really
right.
He didn't have something he could get a knockdown from range. And now you have this medium punch, what I'm going to assume is this medium punch into a target combo, which I think is really interesting because traditionally that's been his go-to neutral move.
Right. Yeah, like in 5, the closest you could get to a knockdown is like low jab, stand short into lariat or something. But as you said, it was spacing specific, right?
Yeah, like this close. Yeah.
Yeah, you got to be extra close, and it's basically got to be off of a setup. And so I like, based on this knockdown here, he doesn't look like he has that same, like it's not like green hand either, where it'll leave him close to the character afterwards to really threaten that mix up. It looks like it's going to be more of a like just poke and then go back to neutral kind of deal, which as a grappler, that's not always your number one goal. Like you usually want to have some kind of oki or momentum afterwards. And I would say that's pretty common for most target combos in 6 that I've noticed, and in 5, is that the easier the target combo is, the less advantage you get, unless your name is Luke.
Yeah, I mean, he just gets everything. He gets that.
Yeah, he gets oki after his jab punish.
Well, why not? Yeah, I mean, he's got everything else. Why not give him that? Which I think is good. And I think Zangief, he's got the Borch Dynamite back, which was his air command grab.
Right.
Now, you know more about 5 than I do. Could he do the air headbutt into the Borch Dynamite in 5?
He could, but it really wasn't. There wasn't a use for that
Yeah, just
because your
looks cool, I
goal,
imagine.
yeah, your goal was to anti-air them with it. So basically, you're jumping after they've jumped, and so going for a headbutt right there is not a good idea because you get a neutral jump to do it. So just the angles and the arcs and stuff doesn't make that a very practical combo. Most Geefs would just go EX air grab instead.
I see. I like this drop kick he's got here. It's pretty interesting too. So in the corner,
Oh, right.
he's got Honda, and he drop kicks him in what looks like maybe a punish counter, and it bounces Honda into the wall, and he gets a little combo after that.
Yeah. So that's a special state in 6 where, like, I think Jamie has it right now too, where if you
EX Palm,
it's like
I think, right?
Yeah, EX Palm, and I think Ryu has it as well when you get hit by his SA2. Yeah, you get basically put in a roll state, and I guess the way that roll state works is that if you collide with the corner at any point, you get a wall splat. And I was checking on Twitter prior to this show, and I found that somebody actually posted proof that on that wall splat on the crumple there, even though Geef he does his combo, he does a headbutt and a lariat there, that state is also grabbable. Like they're considered grounded. It's considered a grounded state, so you can actually land a command grab afterwards.
Pile driver, right?
Right, and so I think it was demonstrated by Hatson with Jamie in particular, because Jamie has that roll state as we mentioned, and then he just did the Jamie command grab. So Geef likely will be able to do the same thing just based on the distance here. Maybe not actually. It might depend on the range of the SPD. That was a pretty far. That was a pretty.
Yeah, I was gonna say headbutt lariat. I think he could. I don't know if he could special cancel the headbutt, but I knew like he would do headbutt, maybe stand short lariat. But you had to be fairly close.
Yeah,
to work. He's kind of far out on this one, and it still works.
Yeah. So I'm thinking maybe he could walk a little bit closer and then just get a command grab afterwards. Maybe get that big heavy one. Like it in 5 at least. Traditionally, the SPDs were varying in advantage afterwards. So the faster it was and the greater range it was, the less Oki you would get afterwards.
Right. So low punch, you get like high range, but nothing much Oki. And then I think EX was the one where I think you spun when you got into the ground, so he got to dash up.
Yep. EX, you got the best of both worlds, but it came at a cost, right? Yes. And so I imagine, I don't know, it might be a mistake to assume that same pattern would apply here, but maybe it's like, hey, if you burn OD, you get Oki afterwards, or if you get a heavy grab, you get Oki afterwards. In which case, this stun state guarantees a heavy grab into Oki, which makes this even more powerful. The other side of it is that it looks like it's kind of a hop kick, right? See how he's kind of in the air?
He's in the air with a drop kick, yeah.
Right. And so that might be a low forward crush, right? If they're walking around poking, and then everyone likes low forwards because of the lack of proximity guarding in this game. So everyone's walking around already, and then low forward, if they're just throwing low forward out, maybe buffering drive rush or something, you throw this thing out, you get a crumple.
Oh no, I'm already scared of that. I mean, also it might be that move is there to counter, because my guess is if his stand medium punch is his go-to poke, you want to hit him low to get around that.
Oh yeah,
probably doesn't going to beat that. So they maybe they thought that we had to give a move to counter people walking forward, maybe trying to sweep him, trying to crouch medium kick him, and maybe it's punishable on block or something, but it's like this kind of high risk, high reward move he can throw out if he makes the read, which I think is super cool.
Yeah. The other thing I'm thinking about is like, what happens if he lands this mid screen? So say he uses it the way that we're thinking about it, where it's like a poking tool, right? Or it's an anti poking tool, if anything. That usually happens at mid screen. So what, if it lands and you get the punish counter and they go flying, does Geef get anything afterwards? I wonder how much advantage he'll have. Will he be able to dash in and get that corner? He probably won't get Oki.
No, or any but kind of maybe pickup. A dash into drive rush.
Oh, drive rush. Ooh. Oh, that changes a lot of things.
Damn right.
Okay, so maybe like this, the roundhouse into crumple while they're rolling, drive rush in, and then you get like stand short into the lariat or something, because the stand short will pop them up, Yeah,
And you
that's
get
the good stuff.
momentum on the drive rush there. So he's probably, my guess is drive rush into headbutt will cover a huge amount of the screen.
Yeah, it's a wave dashed headbutt.
Yeah, wave dashing headbutt.
Oh man. But so by and large, like the cool thing that I think that we like about this character is that his game plan doesn't look fundamentally different than
No, not at all.
the usual grappler style, but it just looks like they gave him a lot of the stuff that was good in 4 as far as like the poking neutral game, and then they've kind of stacked that with like the it looks like the command grabs are distributed the same way as in 5, like Oki and afterwards and whatnot. That's still going to be a guess, but um, like coupling that with the Street Fighter 6 mechanics of drive rush and whatnot too, I think that's just going to make for a really more complete character than either of the other 2 iterations.
I think so too. And also I think, and I read in the Sony blog that I believe it's his level 2 super is his V trigger 1. So he gets the circling thing, right? Vortex that he does. He does it on Honda, so we don't see it against a projectile, but they've specifically made note in that blog that it was just like it was in Street Fighter 5. It is an anti-projectile move. And as you can see here, he does the jackhammer, Bill Goldberg somewhere smiling. And we don't know the Oki gets off of that, but hey, if he's got an anti-fireball tool at all, that is big for Zangief, because in 5, that changed the game when he got that out there.
Yeah.
You had to be at least a little more careful. So it's like, well, now he's got a solid anti-fireball move that he can bust out. Because, my guess is he's not going to have a variant of his V skill 1, which was pretty handy in Street Fighter 5.
Well, so that's the cool thing is that everybody's got one now, right?
Yes, they have parry.
Yeah, exactly. Or parry, yeah. Mm-hmm. So the other thing I'm thinking about here is like, what is his critical art in your mind here? Do you think it's a strike or a grab?
That looks like a grab to me.
Okay.
Yeah, so that initial part looks like a really fast grab.
So we think maybe implemented similar to 4 and 5, which is like it's probably a 0 frame grab, if
1 or 2 frames maybe.
Yeah, or like you basically, if you see the flash, you can't jump afterwards.
Yes,
like you've already eaten it at this point. In which case, he's walking around you and doing his dance no matter what.
Yeah. Which, I mean, and I think just to point out to Zangief visually too, one of the things people were worried about when Street Fighter 5, was announced and it has the RE engine, so it's very realistic looking. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of people were maybe concerned that there wasn't going to be a definitive looking art style to it, but as you can see with Zangief here, they've got his ridiculous facial gestures, his muscles being stupid, the smoke, blowing the smoke out, very cartoony, even though it is. I mean, his muscles are incredibly realistically detailed, especially when he flexes. Like, he's kind of thick until he flexes and you can see how much muscle he's got.
Yep.
But he still looks ridiculous. Like, he doesn't look like, oh, that's what a real strongman would look like. No, he looks like a cartoon character, as he always has. And so that to me is a sign. And Blanca was the same way too, where it's like, oh, even with this realistic style, you can get, as long as the art design carries through, you can get a goofy looking character.
Right. I think Street Fighter 5 and 4 to some extent, because they had that anime kind of aesthetic to it, like they could get away with making it look goofy and still like fitting the art style. But because of the semi-realistic engine here, that we were all like, like how do you still maintain the character? Like I was worried that he was going to look like in CVS2 where they have the alternate art between the different, like the KOF style,
the SNK guy,
the SNK Zangief, yeah,
and it just looks like
it just looks like a dude with like a normal dude you'd see at a Comic-Con, like a cosplayer.
He looks like the guy from Watchmen that was like the hooded justice, like just a normal kind of. Oh, he's kind of big, like all right.
Yeah, he just happens to have a beard and a mohawk or whatever that hairstyle looks like.
But no, they got it. I think they kind of nailed it here. They didn't really go. I don't think his design is too like he's wearing pants. I think that's like the biggest difference. Like
that's pretty much
now.
It. Yep.
But I think you don't want to mess with the classics. I've always thought Zangief looked cool, and he just has so much more professional wrestling flair to him now, which I always thought was somewhat lacking. He has the big moves, and clearly he's a very silly character, but also like they've wanted to make him kind of serious a little bit. But now I think they're just leaning all in on the fact that yes, he is like a silly pro wrestler, and I mean even with especially with his critical art, like you can see the lights dim down. he does the big kick to the gut. Like it's good stuff. I mean, the animation really on him just looks really really great. And,
he looks like a tank, doesn't he? Like
yes, he sure
It looks like
does.
he moves slow, and that's not a bad thing. It looks like every move has just power behind it.
Whenever I think of Zangief, I think of in Street Fighter 4 when Snake Eyes would always pick the mecha Zangief and you could hear him moving.
Yeah, they added those
And
extra
it would
sound effects, right?
you'd get
Yeah.
those sound effects of every time he's shuffling around. That's what I think of Zangief as, and he should move that same way. So
Yep.
I'm glad he's back. You know, it's hard to get too excited for any like the Street Fighter 2 characters now. They've just been around for 30 years at this point. They're like, what more could we do? But Street Fighter 6 has shown that for once they're willing to, we'll change the formula a little bit. We'll add some more detail.
Yeah.
And I love these little introductions, which I think must be taking place in the World Tour mode, where
Probably,
it shows like
yeah.
their name and you've got their nameplate that's unique. I think that looks so cool. And I think it adds a lot of character to a series that I think has always kind of waffled on that point. They make cool looking characters, but a lot of times the stories and stuff of them, and it's just incoherent.
Sure.
So I think making just a character where it's like you get everything you need to in that little, 10-second snippet is really cool. Glad to have Zangief back. I think he is the final world warrior that was be shown. And yeah, that's I think that's all I got to say about Geef.
Okay, I have one last question about Zangief for you.
Okay.
The great green hand debate.
The vanishing flat, please.
The vanishing flat.
Yeah.
It's not in the trailer. No. It wasn't in 5. And what do you think about that? Do you think he should have green hand?
Here my thing about Zangief is that I think he should have at least one anti-fireball move. I don't really care what it is, but I think especially as you see in 5 where he really only had like his V skill to get through it, like man, he could just get hammered. Like I imagine him versus Ed has got to be like unbearable, right? Because he's got a good fireball, he's dancing around with normals. Like I didn't even know how you get in on that guy. And it's like for the first time you saw Zangief really, really struggle like he hasn't in a long time because he didn't have even not just green hand, but any move that really got him through fireballs other than his V trigger 1, which was good, but it was limited. You can only use it maybe like really once, honestly, like for like a big damage thing.
Yeah.
So as long as he's got that super level 2 that we see here, I think that's fine. If he has green hand, I'm not going to be annoyed by it. I think in general they seem to be really like clamping down on anti-fireball moves.
Right.
And if they are in there, they're super read heavy. So they're either a super or it's like Jamie where he's got the breakdance, but it's like super slow. So you kind of really have to make a read and use it. But if it's there, I'm good. But I think he's got to have at least one move that he can use a few times to get through fireballs. He's got to get some good reward for it because otherwise he's going to get pelted.
Okay. Yeah, like it's hard because in this game there's 2 universal answers to fireballs in the parry system and the drive impact system to varying degrees of success. Drive impact is the same deal. You have to guess. You can't really just do it on reaction and expect to not get punished. And if you're wrong, you get punished hard. But with green hand, like it's always been, I don't know. I've noticed that in 4, like that was literally like the number 1 move for that character. Like it defines the character in a lot of ways, and it turns him into a pressure character sometimes. It turns him into like a setup based character. And I agreed with how they did it in 5 where they were like, well, let's just move it to the V trigger or the V skill. And I was kind of hoping that they would like I don't think he should have it in 6 because of drive impact and parry being there, as well as potentially the SA2. But I was kind of hoping that they would put it in as his drive impact, if that makes sense. Like the animation,
that
would be
the
green
animation
hand, right?
of it, yeah, because it's a cool animation, even though it doesn't make any sense. It's just kind of a cool thing that he does, where his hand becomes green and he absorbs I think he's meant to absorb the fireball, is how it's supposed to be. And everyone would just use the EX one where he goes through fireballs regardless. But you're right, in 4 it was the defining part of his character because he could hit confirm into it, he would get the knockdown.
Like even his movement, like he didn't really like walk around as much for a lot of people because they're using the green hand to get around in a lot of ways, right? Like
they would green hand after a fireball or after a pile driver was really common too, right?
That's the setup, right? But on the video here, I've just got it, and it's just like a double chop or something, which not as I don't know. I'm disappointed in that, but also that's a huge nitpick. I'm
Yeah,
perfectly fine. Geef is still awesome.
That should be like a huge lariat or something, befitting a wrestler. But hey, I'll take a chop. I mean, why not?
Yeah. Okay, cool. So that was Geef. Why don't we move on to the next character here, which is Lily.
Talum from Soul Calibur has come. Oh wait,
is that your first thought too? I was like, the moment you started talking about the wind, I'm like, okay.
It's the hair, it's the wind, it's the
age,
the poncho,
the age of the character.
100%. It reminds me exactly of Talum, which is not like a knock against her. I think this character is very well animated too. It's just funny how that all kind of works out.
Yeah. Well, before we get too deep into gameplay, this might be kind of a hot take, but like T-Hawk was never coming back.
No.
He was too big of a racial stereotype, in my opinion. And what I find,
it's rough. Yeah, you'd have to redesign him,
right? And then if you redesign him too much, then everyone's like, this isn't the spirit of the character. Like you have like a really hard
costume. Yeah.
Right. Or yeah, the nostalgia costume.
Yeah. Well, do you remember in Killer Instinct? So they had Thunder, right? Chief Thunder.
Yeah.
Who in the first game is a pretty diminutive walking stereotype. Right. And then they redesigned him in KI 3 for Xbox One to be really sort of like, now he's representing an actual tribe, and they did a lot of research study into him. And then he had a retro costume, and they just changed it because they were like, yeah, we're not walking into this one, guys. Nice try. I assume that's what they do with T-Hawk as well.
Well, it seems like they found a way to have their cake and eat it too, because they're like, what if we just turn T-Hawk into a waifu?
Yeah, you said earlier that there's a type of character for everybody, and grapplers are one of them. Waifu characters are absolutely one of those too. So you got to have them. And this is kind of, I would say for Street Fighter, this is kind of a first. I mean, usually the character, it's like a Karin or a Sakura where they're like, a high schooler, and they're young, but they're not like super, super cutesy. This is like the first that's like super cutesy, kind of like a waifu character, which I think is kind of interesting.
Yep. That, and again, Talum, I think, was kind of hits the nail on the head. Like even at first glance, like once I got past Talum, I'm like, wait, she kind of looks like a Sam Show character, because then like
that's another good one, yeah, especially with the weapons, yeah.
Right. So in order to make like your waifu realistically solve the other problem of representing T-Hawk's style, you got to have longer limbs. But you can't do that if you've got the diminutive waifu stereotypes. So they're just like, give her some axes. Or what are they called? War clubs, I believe.
They're clubs, I believe. Yeah.
Okay.
Now it's funny too, because I think for a long time they've had like these voice clips that were leaked of like It's Vicious, calling out the moves, and you could hear Condor Spire, Condor,
right?
And everyone assumed, well, she's like a grappler, right? But clearly, as we can see, while she does have those moves, I don't think a grappler would be the first thing people would take note of. It's that she has a command grab, but other than that, it seems to be a very long-ranged striking character.
Right. And so would you consider T-Hawk to be a long-range striking character?
I don't know what to consider T-Hawk. Frankly,
that's a good point.
I'm sorry for all the T-Hawk fan, two of you out there. He's always to me struck as I'm a little bit confused as to what he's supposed to do. So even back in ST, he didn't really stand out as anything other than like, unless you played the old T-Hawk, it was T-Hawk, it was Zangief, but with better moves, right?
Right.
He didn't really have better, he had better normals and stuff like that, but he was still a grappler character. He wanted to land the grab. So I wouldn't say he was super different. There's nothing that stood out about him that much. When they brought him back I won't say Alpha 3 because he's just basically ported there from ST and barely counts. Okay. But in Street Fighter 4, they tried to they gave him the Condor Spire, which is kind of a new move where he, kind of leaned forward. So that was unique, but still, I felt like, what does he do other than the grab? Because his normals aren't great in Street Fighter 4. He can move around a little bit with the Condor Spire, and it wasn't until Ultra where it's like, okay, now we've got something cooking here, where he's got the ultra fast Condor Spire.
Right.
Now he can use it almost as a movement tool, right?
That's what I think of as he's like a mobility grappler.
Yes.
Also a giant moving hitbox at the same time, right?
He's moving forward constantly with big normals, and he can move forward as his whole body as a weapon. And you can see here, Lily's got a lot of those same moves. So she's got the Condor Spire, she's got the Tomahawk Buster. So maybe they're thinking of that, like, well, maybe we want a character now that instead of just having the grabs, it's also like, okay, here's all these huge hitboxes she can throw out, which sets her out from Zangief, who gets like little hits here and there, but really is mostly just about the grab. Now she has a grab, but it is not her defining characteristic. It is in fact her big normals.
That's I think she has to earn the grab a little bit more with the strikes, really. I do like notice some similarities as far as the normals go, where yes, they use the axes, but they do kind of mimic T-Hawk's normals in spirit. Like I think her sweep, like right here, so like in her sweep on the video here, two hit just sweep. just like T-Hawk's. And then
exactly,
I think I saw earlier, like when she combos into super or something, she does kind of like the she swipes both ways, which is also a very T-Hawk move. I think that's his
crouching medium punch,
strong,
the safe,
right? The safe, Yep.
The umpire call,
right there. So she just did it on the video.
Right after the drive,
safe. Yep.
Yeah, she does that, which is a hilarious move for T-Hawk. It looks so stupid.
But yeah, so I think like, but the kicker here is that she seems to be able to cancel off of every single one of those pokes, which is very different than T-Hawk, where he would just poke then that would buy him a jump or a spire, right?
Stand roundhouse.
Yeah, stand roundhouse, low
crouch
forward,
medium
I think.
Kick.
Yeah.
Because it didn't do anything. He couldn't cancel into it. So it was like, all right, crouch medium kick.
But with Lily, like we have her doing like drive rush cancels off of these things, or going into Condor Spires. Or Condor, is it Spire's the one that moves horizontally, right? And then
yes.
Condor Dive is the one that like she kind of jumps, and so she can like fake a dive kick almost in a way.
Presumably, yeah.
Right. And then I think the goal is like you get them to respect that dive kick, and then you go in with a jump in, and then that opens up your command grab.
I think
of course, that's how
empty jump grab,
Yeah. I don't know though. Like, so she kind of reminds me of Jamie in a way, where it's like here's a new riff off of the Twins archetype, right? We're just gonna do T-Hawk's archetype, but then make it fit in Street Fighter 6, while also making her a waifu.
a little bit more thought put into it. I always felt like in Street Fighter 6, you can definitely tell, like, I just feel like there's a bit more thought, because with Yin and Yang in Street Fighter 4 especially, it was like, just make them just nuts and let's not worry about like how they fit in. So it was like, this is, you can tell, it's a little bit more considered. You always got to fear the weapons characters in Street Fighter. There's always like either they're gonna be really nuts and you can't hit them ever, or maybe they're a little slow. I can already see she looks like she's got a 2-hit long range move, kind of like Rolento's Stand Fierce, which kind of scares me a little bit, because that move is the bane of people's existence. But we also know, thanks to the Sony blog, that she's got some sort of power-up gimmick,
right?
With win stocks. I don't know what they do. We probably won't know until maybe they have like dev matches come out or something like that. But that is interesting.
Yeah, I think that my guess is they wanted to like keep the T-Hawk move set, but then they also wanted to make it so she could realistically do it in this realistic looking engine. And so the wind power seems like the right way to like say, hey, here's how she does a dive, even though like T-Hawk, you never really had to think about it because he was just a walking
play the eagle sound. We get it. Yeah.
So there are sometimes I was thinking about this the other day, and I'm like, because Street Fighter 2 was just a bunch of stereotypes, what Japanese people thought of different races, right? And
of course.
I was curious if maybe like superheroes are basically the same thing, because that's what she is, right? Is she's got the power of the wind. She's a superhero, and they just happen to. Maybe superheroes are the new way to work in racial stereotypes. Like Jamie. Jamie can do stuff that's superhuman, right? But he's a positive racial stereotype.
Well, I think, nowadays it's about, everybody understands that, like, you know what, if you're going to lean into the heritage, might as well lean all the way in and like learn about the culture and have them look like they actually might represent that in some way, rather than before where it was just like, if I could look up the most basic encyclopedic version and there's a, picture that someone drew in their head of what this looked like, that is what that character is. We're moving past that.
Yep.
And I think it's good. And I think Lily, because I think T-Hawk is like Central American or something. Like he's You fight him in Mexico. I don't know,
right?
but he's obviously a
He
native.
represents Mexico in
Yeah,
the game, right? He's like the
right, a
Mexican
native.
flag.
Yeah, so a native Mexican, indigenous Mexican, and I think, I think she definitely has that look about her.
Yep.
I like her hair. I think the hair texture is really nice. It's a difficult hairstyle that because it could very easily look goofy if you didn't get it right. That
Right.
very specifically knotted hairstyle like that. So I think they did a good job of doing that. The wind effect looks pretty cool. And if I had to guess, my guess is the stocks for the wind seem to power up the Condor Spire and the
Right.
dive and like wind moves, right? You can see at one point she hit confirms into the Condor Spire.
Yeah, I think
And there's like a little startup where she clearly like gets right there. She gets going, twirls into it, and then gets it. So it's like maybe the wind getting those stocks up lets her actually hit confirm into those moves instead of having to just use them raw.
Oh, I see. Yeah, because T-Hawk would poke with the Spire originally, and this is more of a
Yes.
combo tool, right?
Yeah, like he might have been able to hit confirm into EX Spire maybe by the end, but even then, I think that was like really more realistically you were getting in with that move. You weren't really like comboing into it.
Mm-hmm. So maybe they take T-Hawk style and they say, let's make it a combo character. And hell, like maybe, if you stock that wind up, you get the reward you get on this off of this Condor Spires, then she stays really close to him on knockdown and you get Oki afterwards.
Exactly, yeah. And maybe I don't know how she builds them. Maybe she has to land the Mexican Typhoon. Who knows? Like maybe that's the condition, right? You get the
I didn't
grab.
even think about that.
Yeah, maybe the wind stocks are built up by landing the command grab. So you want to land the grab just to mainly get the wind stock, makes your neutral better. I don't know. It's fun to think about though.
Or it could be like Jamie too, where like she just has to back off and do like an install move, or like
could be.
Maybe she'll channel the wind or something. None of that could be like a hint at what that animation is at the beginning.
Oh yeah, yeah. Because Manon has a similar stock gauge with it. She has to land a special
right
to get the metal. I believe it's a metal gauge where she lands any of her grabs.
The more I think about it, it's probably that. Like for a grappler, like you probably want to reward momentum more so than making them run away to build stocks. The Jamie archetype works pretty well for that because it makes him chase him down, but he's a Rekka character and a dive kick character, so he wants to be close anyway. But the idea of a grappler saying, you have to come to me, otherwise I'm going to get like that kind of nullifies the weaknesses of the grappler in a lot of ways.
It does, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, and with Jamie, at least it's like they made a lot of smart things where like he can go into the Rekka and choose to end in one that gives him a drink, or he can end in the I think one of his enders, it gives him enough breathing room. I think the palm gives him enough breathing room to do a drink and like pretty much is not going to get hit for it.
Right.
So he definitely he can do it, but also they've kind of built it into his specials. And so I'm curious as to what, and maybe I should read that blog again. Maybe they say what move gives her a stock, and she's clearly got T-Hawk's eagle here. It's far bigger than her, which I think is cool because T-Hawk is a giant man.
You know what? That's the other thing is when I saw this happen and she had the giant eagle land on her arm, I was like, oh, she's a Monster Hunter character. And like a weird like reverse culture thing, because a lot of the Monster Hunter armor was inspired by like different cultures, and like there's like a lot of laces and leathers in some of the Monster Hunter armor. And so to see that, and as well as her wielding a giant weapon that's too big for her, I'm like, yeah, this is a Monster Hunter character. It's done in the RE engine too, so
yeah,
like,
the clubs
it even looks like
it. That's a Monster Hunter, like that's a monster bone converted into a weapon. Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, exactly.
I can definitely see that. I hadn't thought of that, but yeah, her animations are really good. The wind, the Mexican Typhoon looks really good. The spinning effect, the fact that she does the T-Hawk sit on them from his Ultra One, but she like bumbles into it. I think that's pretty fun.
This is like the epitome of like this. Oh shoot, I was trying to get it. This shot here describes the character in a nutshell, which is.
Yep.
We wanted to cut away from the offensive racial stereotype because he totally sits on him and goes howl, right?
Oh.
But we wanted to waifu it. So they did this instead, and now she's a klutz, and now she's
for the kids,
it's for the kids. Yeah, and also this shot in particular, I at first wasn't sure about what her outfit was, and I thought this was the Japanese being the Japanese again.
Yeah, she has very, very short shorts on under a large poncho.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like upskirts that are okay, I guess.
Yeah, they're passable. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
She definitely comes across more as like cute, and I think they're pretty. They're pretty. We'll get to the next character when we talk about that kind of stuff. But I think this is definitely a little bit more tasteful and just fun.
Yeah.
Just kind of a kid-like character, which, like I said, you don't find it in Street Fighter that often. It's usually, like I said, Sakura and like maybe Akira, but they're pretty. I wouldn't say serious, but like they're like trained fighters and they do some cutesy stuff, but for the most part, are pretty straight-laced.
You know who she reminds me of character-wise? Then Elena. Elena's a good like example.
A little bit, yeah. Who's a
like playful
character,
right?
Yeah.
But
hopefully Elena not as good as Elena.
Yeah, right.
I don't want that, but yeah. Please no healing move. Like let's put a referendum on the healing moves until we can figure out what's going on there.
If they had to bring T-Hawk back and they had to have that style represented, I do think this is the most elegant way to have done it, and I'm very impressed with this character overall.
As I am with generally the new characters, I think they definitely are. They stand out. There's something about it that's like, whoa, that's kind of cool. I felt like sometimes the new, like especially in Street Fighter 4, I felt like C Viper was cool, right? Like she stood out. There's something about her that kind of like, whoa, like her hairstyle, the suit, the glasses. Then you've got like Rufus, who's just a fat fuck. Like that's really it. I mean, he doesn't got much else. Abel, again, he doesn't really stand out all that much.
He's like watching wallpaper as far as his design goes. It's like the wall. It's
he's
just
a big
there.
guy like, with the gi, and he's got
really boring.
the George St. Pierre look. Yeah, it's whatever. And El Forte, again, the most diminutive of all stereotypes.
Yeah, that guy's not coming back. Well, I don't know. They have the chef thing to lean on. They could just dress him up like a chef and be like, he was never stereotypical, guys.
Or just make it just a better lucha costume too. Like it's just a silly looking. He looks like Nacho Libre. Which is just like that's boring. Like his alternate costumes were way better, and at least his gameplay was kind of unique. But like I said, and Juri and Hakan were far better characters that came back later, in Super, and I think that is closer to what we're getting here. Street Fighter V also had a lot of really cool first-time characters.
But I think it is worth noting that like a lot of the really poorly received newcomers were goofball characters. Like even in 5, like Abigail was near universally panned as far as opinions go out of the gates because he looked dumb and everyone said he looks like the game. The game was dumb too.
To be clear, he is dumb. I'm not gonna. You won't give me. Like that is all stupid. Like I hate that.
Yeah.
And also like he and especially original Abigail was not fun to fight against either.
Right. Yeah, he was
that didn't help.
A lot of people didn't really like Birdie's redesign because they tried to make him into a goofball character rather than a threatening badass character, right?
Yeah. Birdie, I don't know. I don't think he's that cool to begin with. Like you can only do so much with him. Like I don't think there's much thought been into him. The only cool thing about him is the weird hole in his hair and his sideburns. I think that's like about all you got.
But then if we look at the Street Fighter,
just sucks.
Oh yeah, Necalli, yeah. Well, even then, Necalli was supposed to be an edgy character, not even a goofball character, right?
Necalli, we hardly knew you.
But I think about the newcomers in 6 too, and I'm like, there's not really a newcomer goofball character. They may be like kind of straying away from that because they're all like young kids and they're like badass or cool looking,
You could argue Luke kind of like he's cringe, but like that's kind of like how he is.
Yeah, I guess so. But he's not cringe in like a failed edgelord way or a failed goofball way. Yeah, he's just like, this is an annoying kid.
Yeah, right. Which
the
is I think
Scrappy-Doo, if you will.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and Jamie's like obnoxious, but like in a fun way. Like he's not like edgy. He's just kind of like
cool.
Skillful and confident. Yeah.
Yeah. And then so she's a klutz, like rather Lily's a klutz, and then I can't think of any of the other new characters off the top of my head, really. Like
Maritza, the concept
she's played
silly,
straight. I think she's played serious.
It looks dumb, but like very clearly, like they take it seriously. Manon's the same thing, obviously over the top.
Yeah.
But is fairly serious off the block, which I think leans more into like the Street Fighter 3-ish design, where the characters maybe been a little silly, but they all had a unique angle that they took. That even if they like, let's say like Remy wasn't a good character, but he was at least a little bit different, and they try to do something cool with it.
Yep.
The less said about 12, the better.
Necro, I would classify as a goofball character, right? And also not very well received, if I recall correctly.
Yeah, I mean, do people talk about him? No, not really.
Yeah. That to me makes it not very well received overall. If they're
I think you're
not
right,
memorable enough to come back, right?
Yeah, pretty much. He's one of the only Street Fighter 3 characters that has not come back at this point.
So I think maybe again, I keep harping on it, but maybe they realize that the goofball angle is not good for. It's only good for like the returning characters like Geef and Blanca and Honda, which even then I'm not sold on Blanca and Honda. And then in exchange, go waifu.
Yeah, I mean it's a solid pivot. It's always gonna get numbers. It's gonna get people talking. People are gonna play her just because she's a cute little girl. Like, of course, yeah. I mean, it makes sense. I'm just, as always, you want it to be animated well and look cool. And I think when there was a problem with some characters, like Nikali, just nothing about him inspires. Like, wow, he's got a really cool animation. Nothing like that. Laura is the same way. Laura has no cool animations. Terrible outfit. Like, nothing about her is very cool. Sorry, Laura.
Well, speaking of cool, do you want to move to this next character here?
Holy Toledo.
Yeah. I will say that when I first watched this trailer and I went, Zangief, Lily, Cammy, I was most impressed by Zangief. But then on rewatch, Cammy looks awesome. In my opinion.
I would say I was the opposite. I much like most of the internet at the moment was like, wow, that's Cammy of all characters. Because when I was on the show last time, I did my rant about Cammy. Horribly boring.
Yes.
Super cool background and lore, but like, what a boring character. Not only in her look, but in her moves and stuff like that. And it's like, okay, what if I told you we were gonna dedicate an entire trailer just so the buildup is that, hey, look, she's finally cool for once. And I'm like,
she's finally
all right,
cool.
I'm listening. Like, I also, one thing I love about Cammy, this is kind of a more nerdy lore point, is that they make it clear in her bio and stuff that like, she's very competent, but she's very moody.
Yeah, that's an interesting one.
A bitterish kind of person, which I always felt was the vibe you got from her in her personality, in her looks and stuff. But whenever in the game, she's just kind of she's like a big part of the Street Fighter 5 story, but she's like woefully generic. Nothing about her. Like, what is her character? Anything like that?
Like the storyline is she wants to save her sisters, right? And it's a noble goal and it's a heroic thing, but like it's not really enough to build up character personality on. It's really like a really like easy angle is to play the haunted by your past and moody style, and it seems like that's what they've chosen.
Yes, which I think works, and it sets her apart from, Chun-Li, who is a bit more like relaxed, clearly like maybe like retired, and now it looks to be a teacher, whereas Cammy now who's still very young, is still doing missions and stuff, which I think is cool. And then obviously they went all out on the animations here. I mean, she probably is the most impressively looked of all of them. Yeah,
like they're going so far as to have like close-ups of her face like this. Like look at how like well.
Yeah, the intro of Cammy, like that's a trailer shot. That's a shot they knew they were doing, and they were like, "Yep, that's going in the trailer, 100%."
I got a little Battle Angel Alita vibes with this too. She's got
like, with her big eyes,
and the duck face look and
duck lips. Yeah, they've definitely, her face is more angular now, so it looks a little more serious too. Like she normally has like a very wide face because this is another thing Street Fighter's kind of bad at. Cammy, canonically, extremely young character. In Street Fighter 2, she's 19 years old. And they really haven't settled on what her age is, but I assume it's very early 20s, or at best by this time, because we don't know how long this game has aged, but like mid 20s at best. So they got to make her look more like a grown woman now. And it's like, okay, they kind of have, her face is more serious.
Right.
She's wearing just clothes, something. Pants.
There's a couple little shots of her where I'm like, she kind of reminds me of like Scarlett Johansson in a weird way, like that like the Black Widow super spy kind of style, and then like even her face like looks kind of modeled. Like I think that's the big thing, is that in 5 I remember there was a lot of controversy around Cammy's face because it didn't look like 4's, and what that really meant is that she had the duck lips and she had narrow eyes and she looked less like an anime character and, in my opinion, more like a Caucasian woman or like a British woman. And I feel say that again.
Well, she is, isn't she?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so like I'm like I think they kept that, and now she actually looks like someone like Scarlett Johansson to me, who is very much a Caucasian woman and not an Asian woman.
No, yeah. And also they really went all out on like she's super toned, like her abs and stuff, like
yeah.
Which again is like it feels weird to point that out, but that is something that defines about her is that she's very obviously she does this stretching bit here, which they did that on purpose. Like
Yep. They're going
the whole
full
point of this
service.
character is that she's very limber and long legs and stuff like that. So it's like, okay, that's you got to do what you got to do. I respect it.
And the other side of this character is that she likes cats, and like
yes,
like that's we're all like, okay, that's cool. That's something they put on a trading card or whatever. But like
it is. Yes,
it's kind of amazing that they've decided to be like, we're gonna give her like cat stretches for her idol poses and whatnot. And I'm not sure if that's actually what they're trying to do, but like
I know
in the PlayStation blog they talked a lot about cats.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of that, but that's true. That is kind of a, and it's we'll get into this a little bit more, but like her gameplay style now is that she can charge up her hooligan combination,
right?
And when she's down crouching, she always has like a sort of a cat-like weird crouch. And it's almost like she's pouncing.
I think
like a cat would.
Yeah. It's like they married the super spy Black Widow style, which she that's what she is. She's an assassin, right? Mm-hmm. That's her backstory. And so like they were like, all right, let's just lead into that, marry that with the cats, and then give her a much cooler look that's not a leotard.
Yeah. Not and don't be fooled. Like that is in the game. We unfortunately saw a leak maybe 4 months ago that she does have that nostalgia costume. So for all you pervos out there,
yep,
don't you worry. They thought about you.
Yep. It doesn't have to be different if you don't want it to be.
It doesn't, right? You can live in whatever nostalgia pit you'd like to. Although I will say, I do think while extremely no person would ever wear a jacket like that, the long tassels so as to remind people of her pigtails.
Of her pigtails, yeah.
Choice. Yeah.
Yep. She's got like okay, this shot right here where it's like, if this hair was red, that's Scarlett Johansson. I'm just saying.
Yeah. I agree. And she's shortened up one of her gloves too, because she has these giant gauntlets that she's
still got the gauntlets. Yeah.
All the dolls wear, but she's shortened up one of them. She looks like she's cut off like maybe the top half.
Oh, I didn't even notice that. Okay, so she's working Michael Jackson there, which is also really good for accentuating the differences in the 3D models. So maybe on the P1 side you'll see more of it, and on the P2 side you'll see less of it. Yeah, you see it right there.
I think you're exactly right. That is probably why they did it. I also noticed that her neutral pose is back to her classic Street Fighter 2. Which is actually looks like a fighting stance and not like her weird goofy like both arms out and then both arms crossed, kind of shuffling in place. It's not a very good, like, you don't look like a fighter, right? Like that's the kind of thing we used to make fun of Mortal Kombat for, right? Like they have this weird goofy stance. Right. Whereas, and you don't see it too much here, but you can see in some of the screenshots that she has like her fist is up to her mouth. She's kind of bouncing back and forth, which is, if you go back and look at ST, that is her fighting stance. So I think that's cool. And then I guess we can finally talk about her gameplay, because she doesn't look like she's changed that much. Obviously she's still uses the same. But as we know from that blog, she can now charge up the hard kick version, or the fierce versions of her hooligan, her spiral arrow, and her cannon spike.
Right.
And we see it in the trailer when she does the target combo into the heavy cannon spike charged up, which lets her switch sides.
What that made me think of is what I think that's Luke. It feels like they tried to add a little bit more complexity to the character's execution, and then they just decided to make her Luke and say, I bet there's a perfect version. I bet there is. In the same way that like Luke has perfect knuckles and stuff like that, you could probably like hold and release a spiral arrow and get that precise, get those benefits, like the knockdowns or the Oki afterwards, or side switch,
It's possible. If I had to guess, my guess is maybe like the held spiral arrow, like it lets her get like a cannon spike afterwards. Like it's a better combo move, because clearly they're taking inspiration from her V Trigger 1 for especially her OD versions of her moves here, like the multiple hits, the switching sides. That's from that, and then she just has her V Trigger 2 kicks. It seems like out of her hooligan now.
Yeah, it's like an axe kick. It looks almost like Seth's Annihilation sword in Street Fighter 5, or
Yep. And those, it was not a very good V trigger, but those were, if I remember right, an overhead.
They did hit overhead, yeah.
Which makes sense because if they're from Hooligan, obviously she wants to land that throw.
Right.
But previously, the only problem with it was there was no reason to get people to stand up other than, I guess, to block the dive kick. But the dive kick doesn't hit overhead. It just, it just hits normally. So there's no real reason for you to stand up, which is why Hooligan was never a very effective move. But they even mentioned, too, in that Sony blog that she has more moves from her Hooligan combination that she's willing to talk about at a later date. So it seems like they want to base her around that move.
That axe kick? Yeah.
Or the Hooligan in general.
Oh, Hooligan. Yeah.
Which I would say, again, is a big step up for her as a character because her moves have always been sort of shitty. Like even in ST, it was like, okay, spiral arrow is clearly, that's just a combo ender. Mm-hmm. You can poke with it kind of, but it's very unsafe. Then you've got her uppercut, pretty basic. The Hooligan is good to an extent, but she's out there for a really long time and she can't do anything out of it as she's rolling towards you. So it's like you can hit her out of it pretty easily. And the motion is hard to do. And then she had the spin knuckle, which in ST, if you remember, is a back, down, back, forward, not a half circle motion.
Oh, yeah.
And it doesn't do anything. It's not a great move. She still has it here, clearly. But she's able to combo into it, which I thought was interesting. Usually she cannot.
Right. Yeah. In 4 and 5, they kind of turned it into an anti-fireball tool, but it was guessing and not actually reactionable. Also, here's my cat. Hi, Luna.
Oh, hi, Luna.
My cat just walked on screen. Hey, actually, we're talking about Cammy, so it works.
Yeah, it's perfect. She heard it. She felt it. She felt the vibes. There she is again.
Yep. So yeah. So it was her V skill, and that was an anti-fireball tool. But just like how Street Fighter 6 anti-fireball tools work, it's kind of like a read or a guess, so maybe it'll have those same properties, but to make it comboable too is an interesting one.
Yeah, that would mean it's a lot faster, which is a good sign because the problem with it is it's super slow.
Right.
And it was always slow and it never really, it doesn't lead to much, but clearly here it doesn't knock down, which it did in, every game before 5. So there's definitely something different about it. I'm interested to learn more. But it's nice for once for Cammy to have at least like, okay, here's a move that she's always going to do. She's based around it. And so you're going to be using it a lot. So clearly the Hooligan looks faster. She can do the dive kick out of it really fast, which is going to make it a much stronger, useful tool in neutral. And then she's got target combos from her Stand Fierce, it looks like, which puts her airborne so she can do a dive kick after and get a decent combo from it.
Yeah.
She's got her old stand medium punch back from Street Fighter 4, and it looks like she can combo into a low kick after it. I don't know if that was a counter hit or not. It's hard to tell from the trailer, but it looks like she hits medium punch, a low kick, and her low kick looks like reused instead of the usual, like she kind of hits high low kick into a spiral arrow. That's pretty good for her. I mean, those kind of low kicks are always really good. The long reaching shin kick, I usually call it. Can't go wrong with that move.
The target combo there is interesting. Like as you said, she can go target combo into a jump canceled dive kick, which I think that's really interesting. So that confirms as well that she still has the cannon strike, the dive kick.
Yes, the dive kick is still there. Yes,
specifically that she doesn't need a Hooligan to do it, which I think is a big deal. That's going to turn into she's going to jump at me and do dive kicks over and over again, and all of us are going to be so happy about that.
Exactly. She's been the story of her career, of her life, ever since 4, where she was everyone's favorite, and then in 5, where she continued to be everybody's favorite. I assume now will be the same thing. The last thing I can really note is, of course, I mean, everybody called it out as soon as they saw, which to me warms my heart because it means that they have the same nostalgia I do. Her level 2 super, which is just very clearly a Street Fighter animated movie throwback, where she just crunches your back by flipping over you while snapping your neck at the same time. A horribly brutal move that is back from the Street Fighter 2 animated film that she does right in the beginning.
Yeah, that was one of the first things a friend of mine told me, because I had seen the Street Fighter 2 movie a long time ago, but I like the storyline is that's actually the opening scene, is that she goes and assassinates someone, and
it's the only thing she does.
Yeah, and she's mind controlled, and everyone's like, "Who's mind controlling you?" And guess who it is, But yeah, I don't know. It's a fun. They're clearly paying attention to the details of the series and respecting the lore of the character, which I don't know. It's weird now where it's the people that are making these games are the ones who were fans of the original
The
one.
fans, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Which is, and that's when they start caring about that stuff. It's like, well, you remember this thing, and my guess is people who are like just normal game designers are like, what are you talking about? Like, no, I don't. And they're like, oh, but that was so cool in that movie when she did that thing. It's just these little things that help add character to, these older characters have been around for a long time, but maybe haven't really stood out. I mean, we talked about when I was on the show last time, we talked about DJ,
right?
Who again has really been fleshed out, especially in his gameplay, to have a lot more character, to have something to him that really makes it stand out. And I just think that's so far one of the biggest wins of Street Fighter 6 is putting a nice shine on what's been old, whereas I think Street Fighter 5 did not succeed in that aspect.
Agree. I can get behind that. As far as like the polish goes, they've got all they clearly know what sells.
It happened to pause on that yoga stretch again. Very convenient.
Yep. And the other thing is, like, as far as what seems attractive, like for fighting game players, when we see a powerful move, that's usually what is the most, like, gets us the most hype, right? And every attack in Street Fighter 6, and specifically like with Cammy as well, she proves this point. Every attack looks purposeful and it looks like it has weight behind it, and it looks strong from a gameplay perspective as well. Because we're like, we already were annoyed with her because she has the dive kick, and then they gave her another dive kick, and we were like, holy shit, like that looks broken. But in reality, the game has a parry, so the attacks can be as broken and busted as possible because there's a universal mechanic that can keep them in check. So
right, and like, we also know that the hooligan has a throw part of it, so that is, when you parry it,
right.
Obviously, they thought about that. You're gonna be able to throw them, and maybe she gets something off a counter hit hooligan throw. Who knows?
So they can get away with making everything powerful because there's the system mechanics are strong enough to withstand that stuff. And then as the player that's actually doing the powerful stuff, it's awesome. And then they made the defensive mechanics good enough to reward the people that are going to put in the work to parry that stuff.
That's a fantastic point. I think we mentioned this. I mentioned this on the podcast again. Street Fighter V's issue, I thought, was the V system. They were really cautious with it. Mm-hmm. And they were a little too cautious, I think, with the V skills, where a lot of them were special moves but bad. Because obviously you don't want to abuse them, because otherwise you'd be able to build V skill really quickly, or V trigger really quickly. But it comes at the expense of a lot of them just kind of not really standing out all that much. They were either combo fodder or maybe like a barely used power up, like I'm thinking like Armika here. Mm-hmm. And it just contributed to that feeling a lot of times of like, well, we know these moves, but before they were good, and now they're not so good.
Right.
And it doesn't feel great. Yeah.
They made things not so good in for the sake of game balance. And so the people that were really like fixated on perfect balance, liked that stuff. Like myself, I liked that stuff, but what it created was a sterilized environment. I think that's what I think of when I think of Street Fighter 5. I think of it as sterile, where the gameplay is stripped down so much, everything is so fair. In reality, we knew in season 1 and 2 it wasn't fair. They just didn't know what they were doing, right? They failed in that mission, but by sterilizing it, like you lose kind of the fun of the mess of all the graffiti flying everywhere, the sumie ink flying everywhere, or the like people just doing fun moves at each other. Like having that scramble is actually kind of important, and it adds all that character that was missing from 5.
I totally agree with you there. I think the other thing too was, I think that, with special moves being like, oh, well, you can't really use them as neutral moves. They're all super negative now. Mm-hmm. That plus like the priority system, meaning like you couldn't just throw out moves that were, weaker than a fierce punch because everybody got a fierce crush counter. Yep. It contributed to that sterilized feeling where I think people played a little skittish, maybe a little safer than they probably should have. Whereas and then there were some characters, but you could go wild at a certain point. And it didn't feel very fair sometimes to play. Like when you're playing against like a Urian, and that every time you hit him, you're contributing to him making your life a miserable living hell very quickly. Or Luke, the same thing. Luke, you hit him as much as you want. He's going to get the greatest fireball in the game in just a little bit. And this sucks, man. Like that really hurts to like all the stuff I'm doing, and it's not going to, the whole momentum's going to swing like immediately as soon as this happens. Whereas in Street Fighter 6, we'll talk about it maybe in another episode, but like Street Fighter 6 is almost designed to prevent the same, you could blow all your meter at the start, or if you block too much and you're a little too conservative, you're going to lose a lot of it. You're not going to be able to do a huge gut bursting combo You got to be careful. You know, you got to look at all that stuff, and that OD meter actually matters.
I think what's happened here is they've said we want to just give you the powerful shit out of the gates. We know people want to do the powerful shit, and we'll do our best to play around that. And these characters look powerful, not just like from a balance perspective, but from a weight perspective, from a an impact perspective. Like I'm very impressed with all three of these characters. I think they're a good
the
final
bone
addition.
crunching, the sound effects really doing a lot of work here. There's a lot more crunching. There's a lot of like the classic like Street Fighter 2 heavy fierce sound like that everybody kind of will know if they hear it.
Right.
That sound is kind of back. And even you'll look at like if you go to YouTube now, someone's got like a compilation of like every character doing drive rush combos, and like everybody can do like Half-Life with their critical art. Yeah. It really isn't like, oh, some characters can take advantage of like red focus or focus attack cancel and other characters can't. Those are actually pretty universal. And the combo stuff everybody likes to do. Mm-hmm. The neutral applications, completely different depending on the character. And that's what we like to see.
Very cool. Well, Tanner, thanks for being with me while we go and react through all these different characters. I guess maybe when they announce DLC, we'll do this again.
We could.
What those characters are like. I think it's well, actually, should I spoil it? Yeah, screw it. I think the characters that leaked in actually no, they haven't been officially acknowledged by Capcom yet. So maybe we hold off on that just to not spoil. And also, it could change. They've got plenty of time to have changed that up. You know,
it could.
So okay, cool. Well, we'll go ahead and wrap this one up here. And thanks everyone for tuning in. You can find us at twitch.tv/Spiral Series, youtube.com/Spiral Series, and Absolute Guard on Spotify under Absolute Guard. This is an absolute extra, and we'll be back with more of those. The usual episodes will air on Tuesdays.
All right, take care, guys. Good talking with you.
See ya.